So hello and welcome to Design Chat, the best live design discussion on the internet. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern. On Twitter, I'm at Hoobajoob and at DesignChat. Every week we get together, we bring together some of the coolest people from the design community so you guys can have a conversation with them. We've got a lot of new ways to do this. We're working on the vocal platform right now. We're very excited about it. And tonight we have a very, very special guest, especially if you're in a typography or know anything or read any book on design at all. You should know the name Erik Spiekermann. Thank you so much for coming out. It's great to see you.
I don't know what you mean by coming out. I'm at home. I came in, actually.
Well, then I should change that introduction. It should be thanks for coming in to Design Chat.
Quite. I was outside and I came back home on time because I'm in San Francisco right now, but I normally live in Berlin.
I was just going to bring that up. We were emailing for some months now, trying to figure out the good time to do this, and it just so happened that you were going to be traveling this time. Are you working in San Francisco right now?
Yeah, we got a couple of little projects here. I'm going back on Saturday, and Susanna, my wife, is staying. She has to do some photo shoots around the country, so she's staying for another couple of weeks, but I'll be back in Berlin on Monday.
Well, we caught you just on time, and it's very exciting. I'm super stoked to talk to you. Because, first of all, you have a huge Twitter presence, which is fantastic. You're constantly communicating, you're constantly putting yourself out there and talking about what you believe, to be true in the design community. And a lot of people find inspiration from you. So I know this is going to be a great chat and the audience is definitely going to love it. So thank you everybody for coming out tonight. But usually, just in case there are people out there who are not familiar with you and or your work, just sort of a brief introduction, where you're from, what you do, and then why you do it.
Why I do it? Oh my God. Well, as you've said, my name is Erik Spiekermann, as we would say back in Germany. Erik with a K. I've seen some people already down there misspelling it, which I totally hate. Anybody who's into type, obviously, doesn't like typos, especially in your own name. So I encourage people to look more closely. It helps. Erik with a K. There I have it on Wikipedia. Yes, I am, what am I? A designer. Originally, I'm a design historian. I never went to design school, I hate to say. So whatever I'm doing, I've taught myself, or I've learned from other people. So I encourage people to learn from other people. I've been running a lot of design studios for the last 40 years. Scary. I started meta design in 1979 and got out in 2001. So that's 22 years in the same company. When it got really big, I went before it imploded. I'm now running a studio in Berlin and Amsterdam with little offices in London and San Francisco called Eden Spiekermann. Eden as in the garden and Spiekermann as in my name. They're the Dutch guys in Holland. They were called Eden, so we just merged. And I do design type kind of on the side. But I need to tell everybody that I don't sit down and design type. It's done in my case in a cooperative way. I have other people who work with me, and most of them are way better than I ever could be, because I'm like sort of the instigator, art director. I have the connections. I kind of know what's going on. I know also what would sell maybe. But I owe a lot of the success of my type owe a lot to the guys I work with. Some of them in America, some of them in Europe, some of them all over the place. And I obviously like to talk about my work. That's why I go on Twitter.
And that's why we're having you on tonight. I sort of get into mentioning that a second ago. We are broadcasting live from Samana Mason in West Dundee. I always want to give a shout out and a thank you to them for allowing us to do that and have this experience. And I also neglected to mention that if you're in the audience, and this is the first time that you've participated in this chat, there's two ways that you can interact. Three. You can just chat in the chat room and talk about what's going on. Or you can submit a question in two different ways. You click the submit a question red button on the side and either submit a text question, type it in, we'll approve it, it'll show up on the screen, you get credit, it's great. Or if you have a webcam, you can hop on video and ask Erik a question directly, which is really exciting. Because that means that anywhere in the world, anyone who decides to tune into this can be part of the conversation and ask their questions and be involved. So please submit questions. We take them throughout the whole chat. Let me explain real quick. So Design Chat has been going on for about a year. I am a designer from outside of Chicago, and I just had this idea, we should all get together once a week and we should hang out and talk to interesting people. So I am not a design historian like you, which is what you went to school for originally, correct? Or art history or design history.
Yep. Art history.
You know, and I have, for a professional level, I have sort of a top level understanding. So I know a handful of different designers. And, you know, with a full-time job, there's about this much time to do proper research. And when I have a guest like you on, what I really need is this times 1,000, you know, to really sort of absorb the body of work that you've been able to put together over your career. And it's overwhelming. It's impressive. I don't even know what to call it. It's absolutely insane. But what I find really interesting is that you know, there was no formal education in design, but you're able to function at this high level, and you sort of tapped into it already, is that you learn from the people around you. So when was it in your career or before you started professionally that you sort of knew that that's how you were going to function and absorb and sort of network through the people around you?
I don't think I knew that. I'm just not very good at finishing things. So I started a lot of stuff, and I went to university, and I had a family very early, and I had to make a living. So I run a little print shop on the side, and that became kind of, that took over. So instead of going to university every day, I went to my basement and printed, basically for a living. And I worked at printing companies, and you know, you learn to make plates, you learn to make repros, you learn to work a stat camera. You learn by making a mistake. I remember one day where I told a guy that, of course I can run this machine. I hadn't got a clue, and I didn't even know how to make plates. And I spent, luckily it was on a night shift, I spent like 6 hours learning to make plates, and I wasted, I don't know, square miles of aluminum making those plates wrongly until I sussed how it was done. And by morning I had made plates and I had printed something, but I was lucky he never looked in the garbage because I wasted so much material. But by morning, after 12 hours, and I sweated, and I probably lost 25 pounds in weight, I knew how to make plate. And when the boss came back, I said, you know, making plates, piece of cake. But I didn't know it before then. And you can learn most things in a day or a night. And it is scary, and I don't advise it to everybody. In fact, I'm jealous, you know, of students who can spend 4 years just going down road that I've never been down, really exploring stuff and doing things carefully and thoroughly. If you run a studio like I do with partners, you always start things, you never finish them, and that's also a little bit frustrating.
Would you say then, because of that experience, that you learned that you learn best through mistakes and just throwing yourself out there and attempting something rather than studying it in a book?
Well, it doesn't go for everybody. I'm not saying just because I did it that way. It's because I am impatient. I am, like I said, I like starting things. I'm very bad at finishing things. I wouldn't advise for anybody. In fact, like I said, I'm jealous of people who can spend days reading a book from top to bottom, or you know, cover to cover. I tend to like read diagonally. I read very quickly. I understand very quickly, but I'm always a little frustrated that I'm staying too superficial at times. I would like to, you know, really probe and go deep. Which hopefully I'll be doing once or if I ever retire. I can finally read all my books. In fact, I think if I have to read all my books, I'll have to be probably about 150 years old because I have too many books. So I hope I'm going to get very old so I can read them all. But that's one thing I'm missing, and I'm sure everybody here who works in that environment knows that you always have a dozen projects open at any time, and you never really... You could always do better, you could always do more, you could always try another color, another typeface, and another strategy. But you have to make do because there's also budgets, and that's the only thing that is a little frustrating, but that's the reality. You know, you work in this environment and you have clients, and they define my day way more than I define my own day. So what I'm saying is, you know, if you learn by books, that's great. I learn by picking up stuff, but it's dangerous because over time you need to get yourself some sort of theoretical basis, if only to explain things to clients.
You talk also about you know, having to, just because of the way that you work, you're jumping around from project to project, but you've also been able to carry out longevity for other types of things. If you look at FontShop, the group that you started, it's 20 years old now, and it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to look at the what's happened in digital type and distribution and say that it's already been 20 years since that opened. I would love to hear a little bit about why it started, how it started, and where you sort of think it's headed in today's sort of digital craziness.
Well, how many do we have? 4 hours? 5 hours?
You know what?
I mean, you want the full story?
We don't have any limit. We can talk all night, man.
No, we won't talk on that because I'm already hungry. No, let me just brings down. I was at the Apple Store yesterday, and I suddenly realized I bought my first Mac more or less exactly 25 years ago in '85, which is very early. And I remember this feeling when I first saw it. I saw the first, the little Cube Mac, 9-inch black and white screen that most of you would have seen in museums. I remember seeing this in I think at the end of '84 at Linotype in Germany, and I saw this little cube on the screen, and they explained to me, the discs and fonts and bitmaps, and obviously I'd already working with type for a long time, and I've been designing specimen books for the old foundries that most of you guys won't know about anymore, like Berthold and Linotype and Monotype and various people. So I was in the type world, but I walked in there and they showed me this piece fresh out of America, and I knew instinctively this would change my mind forever, because this was type on literally my desktop. Before, it was always in some shop down the street. It would take 2 or 3 days. It would cost a fortune to have anything set. You couldn't change anything ever because it was cost another fortune. Because you couldn't do it yourself. You could do rub down and you could do photo setting, which I did to an extent, headline stuff. But basically, type was somewhere over there, and you had to make a choice out of your head from some books, and you couldn't ever explore or go anywhere else, and you had a choice of a dozen, if anything. And I knew then this was it. So then I bought my first Mac a little later, and I remember going to the client at the time, the German post office, which was 500,000 people, a big outfit, and I designed a typeface for them, which later became Meta. And I went in there with a little computer that I borrowed from Linotype and said to these guys, this was September '85, I said to these guys, this is how we'll have type in the future. And they looked at me and they looked at each other and they burst out laughing. I thought, this guy is gaga. Type in this little box? No effing way. Type comes in big trucks and needs big installation, costs $500,000 to set and stuff. This guy is crazy, go home. And they sent me home and they're stuck with Helvetica for the next 30 years. And luckily for me, because I took Meta back home again and made it into my own typeface. I was a little bit ahead of the curve, I guess, as was Apple, as was Linotype, as was Adobe, who invented PostScript. And then, that was only natural that then I started getting more interested in fonts. I worked with Apple early on, I worked with Adobe early on. So I had fonts, and everybody at home didn't have them. So they asked me, you next time you go and see Adobe in Palo Alto, bring some fonts back. So I did. And then I thought suddenly in '87, wait a minute, I'm kept schlepping these fonts back to Germany. I'm getting paid for them, I'm paying somebody else for them. There is a business there. And digital mail order had not been invented. So we kind of invented it because it was obvious that this is something that if people ever want a font in our business, they want it now. They don't want it tomorrow, they want it 3 days' time, they want it tomorrow. So this is before emailing, and this is even before anything else, but we would have to ship a disk. But even the disk would arrive the next day. So it's kind of like as instant as it could have been. And that was simply the beginning of it, that we just, I managed to ship fonts to all my mates who wanted, we had about 800 the first year. So this is like 88, 89. We actually started in 88. Now we're saying 20 years, but it's kind of like a little, I'm not quite sure when we started. It started slowly out of, we had a corner in my office and one person just did fonts. And the fonts were in my cellar next to the bicycles and the old furniture. That was the warehouse. So there.
But it was the first sort of pieces of digital distribution, which if you think about digital distribution, that has revolutionized a number of industries that we're seeing right now. And
totally. Design
itself, the way we work professionally, seems to revolutionize every handful of years. So your personal experience is one where you started physically arranging things, right? And then had to make that transition and understand it and be ahead of it to be able to react to it. But now, if we think about today's environment for young designers, A kid who was born in 95 is 15 right now, right? And probably is surrounded by a number of computers and has had no sort of design education per se, maybe some light art classes, been introduced to Photoshop because it's everywhere. So their first experiences in laying out type or playing with it at all is most likely going to be in Photoshop, not in Illustrator or an InDesign or something really sort of technical like that. It's going to be Photoshop, it's going to be loose, it's going to be all over the place. So let's sort of paint a scenario, Erik. Pretend that you are 15 today and you are just getting into design and sort of discovering what it is. You've seen your first communication arts. What are you doing today and how are you exploring? How do you think you personally would react if you were 15 today?
I have no idea, but I don't think it's any different. Wherever you are, there's always more to discover. And I remember seeing my very first try when I was 12, when I got my first little printing press, and I couldn't believe that these little dirty, pieces of metal, you would put ink on them and you would put white paper on them, and suddenly this white paper had meaning. It had type on it, which is previously just virgin white paper. It was a miracle. And then I discovered that there was to it, and I worked at a print shop and interned and did stuff in my spare time and discover more and more. I don't think it's any different today. You might start at another level, but what to me my first composing stick was with a bit of metal type is Photoshop for somebody else now. And you soon understand that part of it, and then you move on to the next one. So this kid now at 15 will move on to whatever, either making movies, or which is easy these days, but no easier than it was for me to cut up type at the time. The threshold may be higher, but the next levels are always just as far away from them. So I don't think it's actually any difference. Wherever you start, it's always scary. There's always way more than you can find out. And as long as you're curious and you're willing to learn, whether you spend a whole night making plates, or whether you spend probably 3 days not knowing how to do things in Photoshop. For example, like I'm a total Photoshop loser. I still can't do anything in Photoshop except size and save, pretty much. It hasn't stopped me. But I don't think it makes any difference where you start. There's always way more to learn. And sometimes you have a sense for it. This guy in Photoshop may never get an interest in typography. He may just think that stuff has to look the way it comes out of Photoshop. He may not even find out that you can change the anti-alias from hard to soft or whatever, because it doesn't matter to him or her. They may just be into moving images. Some people just get into this type stuff. It tends to be, in my experience, people who are obviously also into language, into words. People who are into type read by definition. They don't watch movies entirely. I also find everybody I work with is into type also happens to be into music. There is some connection there. It's about rhythm and I don't know what, but people who are into type tend to be not the dumbest type of people, to put it lightly. They tend to be more intellectual because they by definition read, and you discover that or you don't. And just because you're maybe not into type doesn't make you a bad designer. I know really great designers who are clueless about type, as I am clueless about imagery. It's not my scene. So you work together. That's all there is to it. In other words, there's as much to learn now as there was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's totally my way of working. Always has been.
It's seeming to become a more and more popular way of working now that we have so many different ways to connect with people, because of the advent of the internet, because there are interfaces like this, where even if you were in Berlin, we could still have this discussion. One of us would be very tired and sleepy, but it could happen. And we're seeing some of these
I'd be in my pajamas,
go. We're seeing this happen more and more in digital ways, and I think we're sort of on the precipice of another type sort of revolution, right? Where people who are designing for the web and finding new ways, some of those people are getting into that without taking any design courses. They're just learning how to program at a young age. I think the way that we're setting type up for interactive and digital documents is going to change very quickly, very soon, because we're seeing services pop up. Foundries, like Google has jumped into the game, where they're going to be hosting typesets that you can access for your website in any way that you want. And then on top of that, if you're hearing any of the inklings of HTML5 and how that's supposed to work, which none of us really totally understand. I'm still grasping. I'm still trying to find someone who can explain it to me correctly so that I know how I'm going to have to work in the next 15 years. What are your thoughts on, what the unknown, how we're going to get to our typography in the future, how we're going to have to play with it for both print and these digital technologies that are changing so quickly?
I get this asked a hell of a lot, and my usual answer is, if I knew what the future brought, I would be a bloody billionaire. I would invent the next garage. I'd be the next Bill Gates or the next Steve Jobs. I am totally clueless, and it would be totally arrogant of me to say I know where it's going. I haven't got a clue. The only thing I do know, there's two things I do know. There is an obvious human need for storytelling. We love to listen to stories. That may be, whether it's music or reading books or watching movies, we love to hear how other people fare in life. Whether that's, detective stories or romantic stories, we need this. We need to connect with other people through their stories. So this is why, type comes about. It started off with accounting, checking up how many sheep you were selling, or you're, swapping against bushels of grain or whatever. But now, type is there because we need culture, we need communication. So that's the one need we have, is storytelling. And that comes from the need to communicate. We do not want to be on our own. I want to tell you how I'm doing, otherwise I wouldn't be here. You want to tell other people how you're doing and how we're doing, otherwise this whole chat wouldn't work in the first place. So this human need to communicate is what made design. Now we're using it also to sell, but essentially it's communicating that I have way more shoes in my workshop than I could sell across the street. So please, guys, come. This is how advertising started, right? Somebody was making more than they could sell immediately. So that's the other human need, to make stuff and share stories with each other, and that's not going to go away. And what we've also learned is there is a certain quality in communication that we're trying to get to. And in type, we got to it about 500 years ago, when books became really cool and good, and type looked great. And what we're doing on the web, we're emulating what the Italians and the Germans did 500 years ago. We pretty much get in there, high resolution type on paper, whether the screen is just bad paper, essentially. But the new screens, if you've seen the iPhone 4, that's almost like paper. So we're going to get there. But other than that, I don't know. I just know that we all want to have perfect type on perfect paper. We want to have perfect sharp images like in real life. Basically, we want to have on the screen, on our tables, what we have out there. Maybe that's why we want 3D. I'm not convinced, but real life is 3D by definition, and type is higher resolution by definition, because we are high resolution. So the media is still a little behind there, but that's the only thing I can predict, is that whatever is possible technically, we do to get to this total equivalent of media. Every media will look like every media. We don't want to have black and white just because there's no color. We don't want to have low res just because there's no high res. We don't want to have mono while there's stereo. That's a human need. We want to have it as close to our real life experience. And I think that's about the only thing I can say. Like I said, everything else, it would be blasphemy if I knew where things were going. You obviously, as a designer, have some sense. I knew that type was going to be important, and it will be still. And one reason I'm against ripping off other people's typefaces or typefaces in the first place is I like more of it. There's 150,000 fonts out there. Probably 145,000 of them are not very good. But why should somebody be stopped from making something, or why should somebody not get honored and rewarded for what they do? The same goes for music. I have all the music I need on my hard drives, but I keep getting more because there's cool stuff out there. It's called culture. What we're involved in is making culture.
You mentioned how quickly that you were an early adopter with the new Apple technologies as soon as they came out. And we talk a lot about in the show on how beholden we are as creative professionals to these technologies and how it changes the way that we're creating our images and telling our stories. Apple recently announced they're going to upgrade their MacBook Pro, but they've been sort of talking to the consumer, right? You know, maybe if at the beginning, if they had a strong focus on the creative professional, it doesn't seem quite that way right now. Do you think that Apple has abandoned the creative professional, or if that's still like a core part of how they're developing and thinking?
No, it's pretty obvious that it has been for years that they are now an entertainment company, and you know you can't exactly blame them for that. They are making things that people will buy wherever they are. The iPhone business now, what did I read yesterday? 34% of their turnover, way more than they make on Macs. I do hope there's enough people there that realize that. That we're important. I'm not talking about loyalty. Why should a company have loyalty to its clients? I mean, I think it should, but why should, you know, morals in business are not normally what you expect. It's still a significant business, and if Apple are slightly clever, and they are clever, they know that we are the instigators, we are the early adopters. You know, we all rush out by the first generation of iPhone and iPads, well knowing that we're the guinea pigs, well knowing that, you know, we're the beta testers. It used to be just Microsoft, but now Apple also gives us stuff to beta test, you know, whatever it is. And of course we do run out. I always have the first Mac this and Mac that. I have the first iPhone, I have the first iPad. We all do, so we are also useful. We don't mind the pennies, we don't mind whether it costs $2.99 or $3.99 by now, because they're also for us tools. I can write off my iPhone. You know, my sister can't. I can write off my computers, and I use them. I use them to make stuff with them. So for us, it's not an expense; it's a necessity. It's an investment, in fact. So I think Apple will keep that core business, even if it's only 10%. And I'm very annoyed that not much has happened recently. Now we just got the the iMac 27-inch. Therefore, they've doing away with the 24-inch screen. I'm not convinced that it's going to go much further. But at the same time, you know, what choices do we have? Quite frankly, I'm stuck with Apple. I hate them for that.
Yeah,
I'm stuck with them.
It's a love-hate thing sometimes that when we talk about this, and
totally.
When you hear about the stories from Steve Jobs when he was deciding what kind of product he was going to create way back when, he talks about typography. He had taken a calligraphy course, I believe, and that he kind of fell in love with that. If you really want to create beautiful images, you have to focus on typography. And one of a current frustration that I have personally as a designer is how I navigate and find my typefaces. A lot of us use a product called Extensis and whatever variation of that to get in through it. And a curiosity I've always had is, why did Apple, if that was part of their core belief, why did that not be part of the machine itself, right? Why isn't there's a great way to see our photos, there's a great way to see our videos and all these other contents, but there's this horrible interface to navigate through our typefaces. Why do you think that has been completely ignored?
Well, I can't really double guess their policies. I have a friend at Apple. I might go and see him for lunch on Friday, actually, who works at typography there. There's not many people work on it there, because it's not a very popular medium. Because for most people is, and I've said this before, type is like air. You only talk about it when it's bad or when there isn't any. For most people, they have plenty. You buy a Mac and you get, I don't know how many hundreds types, and there, you know, there's good stuff there. There's complete Garamonts and Feturas and Baskervilles, basically anything that I would have killed for 25 years ago. There's at least 800 fonts on there, which is actually plenty for most people. There is more than Comic Sans and Sabino and stuff. The trouble is that, you know, we keep wanting more and more and more, and yes, it's obviously something that Apple has not concentrated on. They could have easily supplied a utility. I use Font Explorer or Font Case, which we make at FontShop. You use Extensis, whatever. We buy this. You can also say, well, maybe it's good that Apple hasn't killed all those suppliers. Somebody right down there write Papyrus. You know, that's like the Comic Sans for women. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Girls, small girls, 9-year-olds. It is annoying, but at the same time, maybe because Apple have kind of left it, other people have jumped into the gap, and there are foundries, like you said. You know, every designer is a foundry now. Every designer is a movie maker, and we make do. Apple may have lost it, but we can't expect them to do everything. I am very disappointed myself. But then you look at the iPhone screen, and you know, that to me is the resolution that we'll be getting, presumably with future Macintosh computers. That to me is more important than them making more fonts or even making a font utility, because I can get that somewhere else for $99 or $29 or whatever, and I can get fonts elsewhere, but I can't get that screen elsewhere, and I want that screen to be like paper. So let Apple do cool screens and let other people do the type. We're better at it by now anyway than they are.
I'm going to take up all the time if I keep on going. We've already got a number of questions submitted here, so I'm going to start taking some of those audience questions. If you're just tuning in now, you need to know that you can interact in this interface. You can submit text questions or live video questions. Please do so, because it's really important that we take an active role in the design community right now, because we can, whereas we couldn't have before. Okay, so first question is going to be from Christy Bisecker. I hope I'm pronouncing that. Asks, hi Eric, who were your biggest influences? What are some of the most overlooked things in type?
Okay, there's two questions there. What are some of the most overlooked things in type? Yeah, okay, well let me start with the bottom. What are some of the most overlooked things in type? Detail? Full point. The first part of the question, my biggest influences were the people who believed I could do what I promised that I could do, who might have known that I'd been cheating, that I did spend all night destroying somebody's plates, but they never let me find out. So I was heavily influenced by people who indulged me, who let me ruin their printing presses, who let me spoil their type, who let me waste all their chemicals in their dark rooms, people who let me get into studios that I had no place being in. And people who taught me, and they are and there were peers still. There's lots of people in my studio who do stuff way better than I can. And you talked about this earlier about cooperation, and cooperation is a necessity, because not one person, not even 10 persons can know everything there is to be known in this business of ours now. And in fact, we're back. This is not part of the question, but that's the influence still. We're back to where I was in the 70s, where I needed a typesetter and a printer and an art worker and a darkroom technician to do my work, because I didn't have the tools. Now I have the tools, but they've become so demanding that again we're going back to division of labor. I need, you know, a Photoshop guy, I need a InDesign guy, I need an HTML guy, I need a CSS guy. I need, you know, a C++ programmer, a Java programmer. We have all those in the studio, because I can't possibly learn all those skills properly. So we're back to division of labor. I know that. Sorry, Christy. It's a long answer to a short question.
No, we love it. Keep that going for all purposes. I mean, I'm sure we're soaking it up. The second question here comes from Dave Brenner, who asks, Eric, what's your take on designers like David Carson, who seem to deconstruct type in the 1990s?
No, he didn't seem to. He did deconstruct type. The deconstruction phase happened in architecture, happened everywhere. It was a typical reaction, and whether David did this or other people, to the beginning of the 90s, when things became totally perfect, you know, when PostScript was out there and everything was slick and smooth, and it was all clean and soulless. It was the first digital was kind of wasn't very nice, but there wasn't any depth to it, because we learned a new tool, and David was one guy who sort of emotionally responded to it by denying it, just like the Dutch guys that work with me invented random type that would destruct itself, as it were, destroy itself. So it was a phase, and if you've seen David's work recently, he sort of kind of got out of puberty, not totally, but with the issues I've always had with him, we've had a few encounters, should I say, that is that you can do this for a while, but just denying something, destroying it, quite frankly, is not, I don't think, much of an answer. It's a negative reaction rather than a positive, working with it. That's my take on David Carson. Hello, David. I don't think he'll be watching. We don't like each other very much.
You never know. You never know. I mean, once this video goes on the internet and it's going to be there forever and ever and ever, he may just bump into it. It's possible. We're going to keep on going with questions here. I do want to. Go ahead.
I'm just reading somebody made it. It's a nice typo there. Zach Hinkle. They're talking about David's work lately, and he said he's been using a lot of veranda. I know he means Verdana, but that's a nice typo for the the typeface called veranda. I know when you type quickly, but that's really funny. He's been using a lot of veranda. Yeah, he hangs outside a lot. True. Okay, so carry
That's
on,
awesome. We're starting a design war here. The next question here we're going to take, guys, please. I kid. We're going to take from Ellen L. Heller, sorry. But also, there are no video questions submitted. Everybody's got webcams. Come on, get on video, ask a question, be brave. L. Heller, what role does perfectionism play in your role as a designer?
Oh, nice one. Well, the guy who used to run The Gap and now runs JW Crew, Mike Drexler, he said retail is detail. I think I say the same about typography. I do catch myself spending way too much time on detail, getting things perfect, even though I know that nobody except me and a couple of my buddies will ever see it. But I also remember my mother always telling me, and I'm sure your mother's told you that, or your grandmother's in your case, that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. And it may be my German thing. I will never do anything shoddy. It doesn't matter. I know I'm going over time, and I won't put it into my timesheet because I won't get paid for it. I think something needs to be as perfect as I can do it. Doesn't mean it's perfect. My perfectionism maybe not somebody else's. In certain cases, mine is worse. I drive everybody crazy, going around the desk, and as you know, you see somebody else's stuff, and you immediately see the typos, not in your own, but in everybody else's. There's one typo in 500 pages, and you see it straight away, and I do, and I know it's given my designers a hard time, but I think it's very important that whatever we do well, and there's a reason why Germany exports a lot of stuff, like cars and stuff, because we try to make them perfect. The problem is it also makes them expensive. So there is sometimes the issue, we make things more perfect than anybody would need or appreciate, and there is a premium on that. So maybe sometimes, and we often have to go and do make compromise, and like I said, the client won't pay for perfectionism. And I know most of my colleagues, they switch off their timesheets at 6 o'clock and carry on working for 2 more hours because they want to make it perfect. That's just the way we are, and I'm sure most of us are the way, and I think it's good. I think we need to be perfect. We need to love what we're doing, and if you love what you're doing, you want it perfect, don't you? Whatever you think is perfectionism. Mine is different from yours, I'm sure.
Is there
and I'm sloppy in some
on the opposite side of that? On the opposite side of that, is there a time where you felt that your sort of obsession or your need to make it perfect got in the way, or led you down a path that you at the end of the project found out was not the right path?
Oh, often, simply because there are these constraints of time and money. And you're running out of time, you're running out of money, and you're still doing something that nobody cares about but yourself. You are doing yourself on your client a service because you're getting sidetracked and you're over there in the detail when you should be there in the big number. Very often you don't see the wood for trees when you have your head too deep into the detail, your nose too close to the paper or the keyboard, as you were. That is a mistake I do make, and we all make. But again, if you work in an environment of colleagues, of peers, that tends to get mitigated because they'll say, "Oh, wait a minute, shut the hell up, enough." Or I say this to the designers who work with me because they can be worse than me. I said, "Look, you've spent 2 days trying out 450 typefaces. I could have told you which one to use the first day. I let you do it for a day because it's useful and nice. But now, okay, done, enough. I'm now telling you what to do or which way to look." So we have to always play that. Like I said, we need the perfectionism, and but we also have to earn a living, and we have clients and deadlines, and we have to sometimes distinguish between what comes very close to can I say the word masturbation on screen? Playing with ourselves rather than getting the job finished. But I don't know. Is that type designer who doesn't sometimes get carried away. Type probation, yeah. That's what it is. But what, again, I mean, if it's fun, hey, it doesn't hurt anybody, is not. It is infectious.
The doctor said it was okay.
There's no bodily fluids exchange. Yeah, somebody has another word for it on my screen, but I won't say that. I like the little comment here. Someone was hesitant to video chat for fear of looking as spiffy. That should be a double F, as we did 5 hours ago. Yeah, there's some guys, it's like 3 in the morning, right?
Yeah, some people are staying up pretty late to do this, and I'm flattered.
Look, my hair's all messy, I don't mind.
We forgive you. It's okay.
This morning.
We're a very accepting group here on the show. You were sort of tapping into, how much there are some really fun things going on with typography right now. It almost feels like there's a little resurgence in lettering and hand lettering and handmade things.
Absolutely.
I saw that there was an announcement. There's a school called the Cooper Union, who, in collaboration with the Type Directors Club, is starting a new program. And it's a certificate and a degree specifically in type design. It's a school, I think it's on the East Coast. I'm looking at my notes here. It's 3 terms, but in 1 year. Yes, New York.
Yeah,
and
is in New York. Yeah.
I believe they were claiming in this news release, in this press release, and I didn't get sufficient enough time to study it, but they said that this is the first degree in the U.S. That's like this. Some of these certificates and degrees exist in other places in the world, but I almost found it sort of shocking that this is the only one in the U.S. and hard to believe.
Yeah, it is hard to believe. There has been a course in The Hague, in Holland, in the Netherlands for a long time. That's where a lot of my colleagues come from. I recruit a lot of people from there. A lot of the FontShop designers, the font designers come out of Holland for that reason. That's the course. And there's been a course in Reading, England for a long time also, with a slightly different angle. And those have been the only full-time courses up to master or even PhD. In the case of Reading, you have a PhD in type design / type history. And it's amazing that the US has taken that long to catch up. There are, of course, fantastic type designers here, but they're all kind of self-taught. When I met Christian Schwartz at CMU Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, I don't know, like 15 years ago or something, he was 19, 20 or something, and he was already a type designer, but nobody had taught him. And all the other type designers I know in this state, Jonathan Herfler, Tobias Frey-Jones, they're great guys, but they've all taught themselves. Maybe it's good. They taught themselves because they were obsessed, maybe from puberty onward, whatever went wrong in their childhood, one never knows. It is a bit of a nerdy profession, and type designers are little weirdos. Let's face it. I mean, if you spend 12 hours a day looking at little letters, it's not healthy. But they're self-taught in a way. I think that's cool because it gets the best out of there. It's so difficult to become a type designer. So it was. Now it's becoming more easy. We're going to have more, and we're going to have more mediocre type designers because you think you have a certificate, you think you're a type designer. But so far it's been a very sort of a strenuous process and very Darwinian in a way. The toughest survived only. There's a million type designers out there, but there's only about 24 that I reckon are really, really, really good. And there's some brilliant people. There's some brilliant people in America. But only now have they found a course. I find that surprising.
There's a great question sitting here in the chat room from Carolina D. Bart asking, is there a typeface you admire that we would be surprised to find out that you admire?
Yes, actually. If anybody knows the sort of typefaces I do, they tend to be sort of fairly Teutonic and constructed and orderly and disciplined. I remember hating stuff when I was in a composing room, metal type, way back in the 60s and 70s. I hated this Frenchy, all those loose lettering, because in metal it didn't make any sense to have a brush typeface and stuff. But I don't know when it was. It must have been in the mid 80s or late 80s when I sort of discovered for myself the French stuff from the 50s. I don't know if anybody here has heard of Roger X. Coffin, or Roger X. Coffin, you probably call him, who, for example, did a typeface called Mistral, the warm winds that come from the south into France, which came out in metal. It's like a handwritten brush typeface. I have a total thing for that. I don't think I've ever been able to use it. Actually, ITC made an extended version a few years ago. But to me, it's the Frenchness itself. I remember, you guys won't. If you go to France anywhere, France is a large country with very few people in it. It has fewer people than Germany, but it's twice as big. There's all these rural areas, and you have the little plumbers and the postmen. They drive around in these little corrugated vans, the little 2CVs, and the type on the side for the plumbing service is inevitably used to be Mistral. And I have a total crush on that typeface, and it's totally unlike me. And I'll, by the way, have to say hello to Carolina Di Bartolo. Have you heard the news about our common student, by the way? Okay, this is a little private thing. Carolina is here from San Francisco.
You can have that conversation. I'd love to hear that. It's like being a fly on the wall in your office.
No, it's a student of hers has just won a major prize, and but it's still very secret, so we won't say anything else about it.
Well, when we can announce it, I'd love to put it out through the DesignChat feed because that's awesome news.
I'll let you know.
Okay. Next question we're taking here comes from Dooley Williams, who asks, what role did you play in the European Union Creative Council?
Well, there wasn't a creative council as such. What the issue is referring to is that the European Union, which is kind of like the United States of Europe, with 27 member states, last year declared 2009 as the year of creativity and innovation. They have, 1 year maybe the year of mechanical construction, and another year the year of natural birthing. I don't know. They have these weird years. But somebody realized, wait a minute, innovation is important, and we need creativity to have innovation, and vice versa. And they announced, I think, 40 ambassadors, like 1 or 2 from each country, and always like a creative person, a harmless person, like a musician or a designer, people that can't do anything, and a serious person, like a scientist. In my case, the other German guy was the guy who invented the MP3 format. So
wow.
The 2 of us were asked for all these meetings, and me being me, I played a bit of the cat amongst the squirrel. No, what is that? Cat amongst the pigeons, I should say. The enfant terrible, the French say it. They asked me to be creative, and I was. I stirred up some meetings, and we wrote a manifesto, what role creativity would play. It didn't go very far, but those things I've learned are long-term issues. My agenda there was to basically make the European Union aware of how important the things are that we do. The European Union is not only a political body, but it's a major client. I mean, they buy so much design, they commission so much architecture, they commission so many projects in everything that we do, and they're the most despicable client, as we know the public clients. They put out those horrible tenders that are always won by PR agencies because they happen to know the right people, and then they get some freelance kid who does the most horrendous stuff, and they have, every time they do anything, they have a new logo, so they have billions of logos, and they're all one is worse than the other. So the design standards totally suck. And I told them so much, and I have no idea whether they ever invite me again. But I know some people listened, and some people realized that in order to further design and creativity, they're going to start in their own place, to start at home, and have better tenders, invite better designers, and just push up their standards. So I think I might have made a little difference.
It's a trend that designers bring up once in a while, where we want a good relationship with our governments and our governing bodies around us, and to be able to prove our worth, right? That there's value in good communication, and that they might be able to benefit, and the community as a whole might be able to benefit from having a top-level professional design sort of council and that sort of thing. But it seems odd to me that we are, we kind of pose ourselves as the great communicators, right? We are the people who understand how to set type. We're the people who understand how to show images that tell our story. But there's always this constant struggle about proving the worth, the value in design. Why do you think that this struggle never goes away, and that the people don't just, love us for what we do? Why is that always there?
Because what we do is visible to us, but not to everybody else. Like I said before, good design is invisible. If your coffee pot works and your bed works and your bicycle works and your newspaper works, you don't think about it. You only think about design when it doesn't work. Not because someone said, wow, I read a great typeface today. Of course you don't, because you say, I read it was badly printed. My mother used to say this, and I always said, look, mother, it's not the print, it's the typesetting that sucks. The print is fine, it's just horrible type and bad setting. And to her, until her death, she never understood it, even though I spent 50 years trying to tell her that. But that's what most people think, so, you know, tough luck. We are by definition invisible, and we are a service industry, and the more we talk about ourselves, the more people dislike us, because we are supposed to be seen like children, seen, not to be heard. Nobody wants to talk about us and with us. We do, however, have a great chance at the moment, and that is, you know, we have to redesign our world, certainly our countries. I don't want to make myself too unpopular, but, you know, the infrastructure in the United States of America sucks. It blows major. You guys are in the 50s when it comes to, you know, public transport and trains and the roads here. I ride a bicycle. I shouldn't, because I'm doing myself a lot of damage by going over those cracks and holes and potholes. The streets here are way worse than anything that we would consider the third world. So, and we all know, I'm not going to get into politics, don't worry, but we need to spend a lot of thinking and redesigning our countries. You know, I'm mine and you yours. I was in Los Angeles at the weekend and spent 3 hours in the most horrendous traffic getting out of LAX into Pasadena, and I thought, this is broken. I mean, if people do this every day, 8 lanes of bumper to bumper, with fumes coming out, 1 person per car, this is sick. This is not what we're supposed to do. This is not what we do for a living. This is totally ill. And we've got to fix it. And, you know, we've got to fix the fact that we burn dirty things to make energy, that we waste more water than we use. This world is quite sick. And designers are in a good position to solve some of those problems, because one thing we do better than other people, we do things sideways. We're lateral thinkers. We know, we look at a problem and we go on the back and say, wait a minute, I could look at it another way. It's called design thinking. It's nothing to do with graphic design or industrial design. It's simply an attitude we have, a training that we have. We look at a problem, we take it apart, and then we look at the parts and then we put them together differently. You know, like kids do with their toys. And the things, I remember taking apart, you know, things and putting them back together, and they always work, even though you put them back together in a different order. Even in cars. When I used to fix my own cars, I always had bits left over, but the car still worked. There was always a couple of washers and screws and things lying on the garage floor afterwards, but the car still worked. So, but we are not afraid to go in there and take things apart, and we have to do that. We have to look at stuff and say, is this really what it's supposed to be? It starts even with a client walks in and says, I need a 16-page brochure. Well, most of us would say, wait a minute. You need a 16-page brochure? Maybe you need a, iron your shirt, or change your diet, or maybe have a website, whatever. But the 16-page brochure is not maybe what you need. So we've always been trying to distinguish with our clients between what they want and what they need. And the good designers will not be arrogant and take clients off, but we will get into conversation and say, wait a minute. Let's look at your issue and the problems and your audience, and then define what maybe you should be doing. Okay, if you desperately want a brochure and you're paying over those, fine, here's your bloody brochure. But we want that conversation first. And most good designers I know will have that conversation with the client. And these are the conversations that we need to have in all walks of life, because we are uniquely qualified to look at problems and redesign the world we live in. And I'm actually sometimes quite excited about this, that there's things that we can do by communicating about them. We're starting a big thing in Berlin, and next year a conference, exhibition, event about urban mobility. It's not about bicycles only, bicycles, electricity, electric vehicles and stuff. It's simply some of us get together, I'm doing the communication, doing the logos and stuff I do, other people are doing other things, because it's an issue that people need to know about. So, we are well placed to get involved in those issues and make them public. Get into politics. Politics doesn't mean you have to be elected as a representative.
We unfortunately we're running near to the end of our hour, and we have a lot of questions queuing up. So I'm gonna maybe we'll do sort of a speed round real quick and get through a handful of them.
Oh my God, it's been an hour already.
Alex Mao. Yeah, we're flying. See, it happens every week, and especially when we get on these crazy topics. I tweeted out earlier, we could go on for 5 hours tonight. There's so much. Already, look at that, TikTok, see? All right, moving on. Alex Mao, do you have any recommendations on books and films? What is on your current radar, Erik Spiekermann?
That is very simple. Anything and everything. I read everything I can put my hands on, from novels to books about mathematics that I don't understand, but at least I've been there. I watch every movie I can possibly find, and right now I'm actually going back through sort of black and white 50s and 60s French and English and German movies, because they are very cool if you go back to them. So I wouldn't be specific. There's no one book I would point out, no one movie I would point out, but I think we all thrive on just, in imbibing as much as we possibly can. Just learn, and read, and watch. That's my advice to everybody.
Okay, moving on. Dropping. You're still here. Sorry, I'm reading through the questions and trying to pick the good ones to keep the conversation moving. TikTok. Okay, I'm moving on. This one, what is
I like this one. Somebody who designs sponges. Yes, I call myself a sponge. Good, that's a good one. Soak it up.
Tim Phelan asks, when deciding on typefaces, do you think intuition or historical context is more important?
Okay, well, it's very easy. Intuition is incredibly important, but intuition only works if it's informed. In other words, that's why I say learn as much as you can. The more once I know a lot of stuff, I don't have to look it up. Then I can trust my intuition, because my intuition is informed, is based on knowledge. I have the confidence of knowledge. In my case, I know a lot of stuff, a lot of redundant stuff, but I know a lot of stuff. I know a lot of facts. I do crosswords, and I win pub quizzes because I know so much stuff. But then I just use my intuition. If you don't have that knowledge yet because you're young or you haven't read enough books or whatever, then you may have to do a little bit of research. So it's a mix of both, but ultimately I do everything by my gut feelings, quite frankly. And I make my mistakes, believe me.
So we're going to take our first video call, and probably our last, because we're right at 9 o'clock right here, from Christy. I'm answering her name, Christy. Please come on and ask your question. Hello, Christy.
Hi. Christy, bicycle again. Good old Austrian name, that.
Austrian? Okay, my family thought it was German.
Yeah.
So, I'm a design student, and basically my question is, what is your process from when you work on something? What is the beginning to the end? Like, what kind of the mind frame you go into?
Well, I think like everybody else, the first one is always avoidance. Trying to leave it to the last minute. I hate starting projects. I always think it's very cool, and then there's always something else to do, and you put it aside, and maybe, find some information, put it on your hard drive, put it in your drawer, and then I avoid it like the plague. And then the client calls or the project manager calls. I say, oh, yeah, right, I'm sort of in the middle of it, and I haven't even looked at it. And I avoid it some more, and then, the avoidance strategies that we all have. Then you fix your bicycle, or you tidy up your bookshelf, or you copy your photos over to iPhoto, that sort of stuff. And when it's inevitable, like for example tonight I have to write my column for Blueprint magazine, it's 2 days overdue, then you start looking at it, and then my process is like everybody else, because I've really, in that time that I've been avoiding it, I've been thinking about it, of course. It's been, entering my subconscious, and then all I need to do is spend 10 minutes and it all comes pouring out. So avoiding it for a few days or weeks or whatever, until it's inevitable, until everybody's screaming at you, until everybody's mad at you because you're late. That's my method. It's not actually a method, but it's the only way I can work. Procrastination is something that we all do. We all do, because we always have more on our plate than we can ever possibly manage. We can never say no. Everything's always interesting. But I know that while we procrastinate, it works on the backs of our little brains. It matures, it ferments, as it were, and then then the core comes off, and it all comes. In my case, in any case, pouring out, and then it usually takes minutes only to sketch it out, visualize it, write it out there. Like, I've been thinking about this Blueprint article for a couple of days, and I know I'm going to sit down in half an hour after I had a bit of dinner, and I'm going to write it in 25 minutes. But I should have written it 3 days ago.
Katie, thank you so much for coming on and asking a question. Thank you to everyone else who asked questions this evening. Unfortunately, it is 9 o'clock. We are out of time. We do need to run on. Erik, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out with the design community and answer some questions and talk design. It was a lot of fun. You're welcome back anytime. I would love to have you on because we can do another 6 hours of discussion easily with our eyes closed. A lot of fun. So thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thanks for inviting me and for forcing me to commit to a date. I was difficult to pin down, right, Ryan?
Yeah, man, I wasn't going to give up. I was not going to give up. So we do this every week. If you haven't seen this before, thank you. We will be back next week talking to, actually, where we're broadcasting from, Samana Mason, Dave Mason and Kevin Kruger. Two of the partners here at Samana Mason who are putting on the CUSP conference. And that's what we're going to be talking about and promoting the CUSP conference for next week. Please tune in, same time, 8 o'clock Central. Erik, bravo. We will talk to you very soon.
Hey guys. Love and peace. See you guys. Bye.